Okay, so the first question is asking us, um, does this fraction round to 0, 1/2, or 1? So as I've shown in class, I like to kind of make a number line where we have 0 as being 0/8, we have 1 being as 8/8, and the middle of that is 4/8. So if you look at our fraction, 3/8, that's going to be right there. It's going to be closer to 4/8 than anything, so this rounds to 1/2. For this question, similar to the previous one, we are breaking up the fraction into twelfths, so 0 is 0/12, 1 whole is 12/12, and half of that is 6/12. So if I broke these fractions into twelfths, 1/12 is going to be over here closer to 0/12, which means this fraction would round to 0. Next question. For 5/9, what would that round to? All right, well, 0 would be 0/9. 1 whole would be 9/9. And in between the two, I know you can't really write a decimal in a fraction, but 4.5 out of 9 would be right in the middle. So 5/9 would clearly be somewhere over here, closer to 4.5/9 than it is to 9/9. So this would round to 1/2. Your teacher asks you to add the fractions 1/6 and 5/8. The first thing you do is list the multiples of 6 and 8 to find the least common multiple. So fill in the blanks. So let's go with the multiples of 6. Well, if you count by 6, 6 times 1 is 6, 6 times 2 is 12, 6 times 3 is 18, 6 times 4 is 24, 6 times 5 is 30, and I made a mistake and I'm going to fix it on your sheet. This should be 6 times 6, which is 36. See, even teachers make mistakes, but I don't feel like making the video over, so it'll be fixed on your sheet. The multiples of 8 are 8 times 1 is 8, 8 times 2 is 16, 8 times 3 is 24, 8 times 4 is 32, 8 times 5 is 40, and 8 times 6 is 48. Before I go on, I actually don't like doing times 1, times 2, times 3, times 4, times 5, because if I know how to just count by sixes. So 6 plus 6 is 12, plus 6 is 18, plus 6 is 24, plus 6 is 30, plus 6 is 36. Same thing here. If I count by 8, 8 plus 6 is 16, plus 6 is 24, plus 6 is, let me take a step back. 8 plus 8 is 16, plus 8 is 24, plus 8 is 32, plus 8 is 40, plus 8 is 48. So to list multiples, you could just count by that number and keep adding that number as needed. Sorry for any mistakes I made there. In any case, the least common multiple is going to be the first multiple that these two numbers share. Well, if you look at it, the first number I see them both share is 24, which means the least common multiple is 24. And that's going to be the denominator we use when we add these two fractions. Next problem. 1/6 plus 5/12. I'm going to use the multiple method just to show you. 6 is 6, 12, 18, 24. Those are the multiples of 6. And the multiples of 12 are 12, 24, 36, and so on. Well, clearly the first multiple they both share is 12. So I'm going to use 12 as my common denominator. So 1/6 is something over 12 plus 5/12 is something over 12. And what do I do? Well, to go from 6 to 12, I would multiply by 2. So I would take that numerator, multiply it by 2. So 1 times 2 is 2/12. 12 to 12, you multiply by 1. So 5 times 1 is 5/12. And I know I'm going to say this over and over again, but I just want to point out, all I'm saying is that 1/6 is equivalent to 2/12, and that 5/12 is obviously equivalent to itself, 5/12. Once we have common denominators, now we can add, and what we get, well, 2 pieces out of 12 plus 5 pieces out of 12 would equal a total of how many pieces out of 12? 7/12, and that's the answer to this problem. 1/3 plus 3/10. Well, let's see. Can I find the multiples? Well, I could sit there and list all the multiples of 3, but I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to take the bigger of the two denominators, and I'm going to just list the multiples of that. 10. Does 3 go into 10? No. The next multiple of 10 is 20. Does 3 go into 20? No, it does not. Next multiple of 10. Does 3 go into, is 30. Does 3 go into 30? Yes, it does. So the common denominator I would use for this particular problem is 30. So 1/3 is something over 30, plus 3/10 is something else over 30. Let's get our new numerators, shall we? 3 times what gives me 30? Well, that would be 3 times 10. So I'm going to take the numerator, multiply that by 10. So 1 times 10 is 10. 10 times what gives me 30? That would be 3. So I'll take the numerator, multiply that by 3. So 3 times 3 is 9. So I have 10/30 plus 9/30. Now before I add, I'm going to make the point again. 1/3 is equivalent to, it's the same as 10/30. And 3/10 is equivalent to, it's the same as 9/30. So together, when I add them, how many 30ths is that? Well, 10/30 plus 9/30 is 19/30. Sorry for my handwriting, I'm using my mouse. Let's fix that. It's 19/30. Next one. 1/2 plus 3/10. All right. I'm going to use the method where I list them all, but don't always have to do that. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. These are the multiples of 2. Multiples of 10 are 10, 20, 30, and so on. Ugh, that's the ugliest 30 I've ever seen. All right, so what is the least common multiple? Well, it's clearly just 10, right? So let's kind of think of it let's think of it this way. If 10 is the bigger number of the two multiples, right? I could just find multiples of 10 and see does 2 go into them. So the first multiple of 10 is 10. Does 2 go into 10? Yes, it does. So there we go. We could have just stopped right there, which makes sense because 10 is clearly the first multiple that they share. All right, now that I did all that work, the multiples of 2 and 10, least common multiple is 10. So what do we have here? 1/2 is equal to how many out of 10? Well, what do I multiply 2 by to get to 10? That's 5. So 1 times 5 is 5. What do I multiply 10 by to get to 10? The answer is 1. So 1 times 3 is 3. So let's kind of remind you again. I know some of you are getting sick of seeing this, but I think it's important to know that 1/2 is equivalent to, it's the same as 5/10. and that 3/10 is equivalent to, it is the same as itself, 3/10. But now that we have the common denominators, we can add the numerators, but keep the denominator the same. We have 5/10 plus 3/10 equals 8/10. Now, this is an acceptable answer. This would get you full credit right there. Big check mark, right? But I also want you to notice that 8/10 is not in simplest form. Turns out that 8/10 can be simplified. 2 goes into 8 4 times, 2 goes into 10 5 times. So back when I was in 7th grade, you'd only get half credit for this. But right now we're just learning. But I just want to point out that 8/10 is equal to 4/5. Once again, these are equivalent fractions. This would have been an acceptable answer, but bonus points for anybody that, no, not actual bonus points, but props to anybody that can actually get that for me. All right, for number 9, the multiples of 14 and 4. Ooh, these are a little bit harder. So this is one where I definitely don't want to list all the multiples. So let's start with the bigger number here. It's 14. So 14 times its 1 is 14. Does 4 go into 14? No, it doesn't. How about two groups of 14? Well, that would be 14 plus 14 is 28. Does 4 go into 28? It actually does. It goes in 7 times. So look at that. It was pretty easy to find the common multiple. So 5/14 would be something over 28. Plus 1/4 would be something over 28. So now we have to find what that numerator would be. All right. So to go from 14 to 28, you multiply by 2. So I'm going to take the numerator, multiply that by 2, and I get 10/28. To go from 4 to 28, you multiply by 7. So I would take the numerator, also multiply that by 7. So 1 times 7 is 7. So what do I get here? 10/28 plus 7/28 is equal to 17/28. That's how you add those. I missed this part, but I want to explain it now again. 5/14 is equal to 10/28, just like 1/4 is equal to 7/28. When you add these together, once you get common denominators, you know that 10 out of 28 plus 7 out of 28 adds up to 17 out of 28. And now the last problem, we have 4/5 plus 2/15. Well, I'm going to spare you the listing of the multiples. It's pretty clear to me the common multiple that they share. Least common multiple is 15, right? So 4/5 would be something out of 15, plus 2/15 would be, well, let's kind of, we're getting a little better about this. 2/15 is clearly going to remain 2/15 because 2 out of 15 has to be 2 out of 15. Now 4/5 is going to be what out of 15? Well, 5 times 3 gives me my denominator of 15. So if I triple the denominator, I have to triple the numerator. So 4 times 3 is 12. So we have 12/15 plus 2/15. Before I add them, let's just remind you, 4/5 is equal to, it's the same as, it's an equivalent fraction to 12/15. Just like 2/15 is equal to itself, 2/15. So now we have groups of 15ths that we can add. That's why our common denominator stays 15. So 12/15 plus 2/15 is 14/15, and that's our final answer. I know I spent a long time going through this, but hopefully by going through it slowly, it'll help you out.